Hello, everybody, and welcome to Forever Sports. There was a list doing the rounds about the 10 dirtiest rugby players of all time, which features 3 South African players and is causing quite a lot of debate in the great old world of social media. And been said it a few times, and having a look at it, I think there's always a big difference between a dirty player and a hard player. I personally believe, I think when you talk about dirty players, you got to look at intent. You got to look at some of the actions off the ball, some of the actions that go above and beyond what the laws actually allow, versus players who are just sort of hard man inverted commas. Players that hit hard, who bring a different level of physicality to those around them. And I think that these days we often get that very mixed up. And we're going to have a look at this list and basically see if that is the case and where our South Africans rank. And I'm pretty sure we know at least sort of one of the South Africans we are likely going to see in the list itself. Before we get into it, please do smash a like on the video. Please do subscribe to the channel as well. So I will set this list. It is on ruck.co.uk, which have been known to have a couple of controversial lists and content, to say the least. And basically was sent this list by a couple people, so I thought, well, you know what, let's jump on and do a video about it and see what they've got to say, because they basically intimated saying, what do you think of the South Africans on the list? So we're gonna go through the list and then I want to know what you guys think. Let me know what you think of the list down in the chat below, and let me know which players you think are hard done by being on the list, as well as maybe should be on the list given their sort of discipline history and some of the actions that we have seen. So let's get into it, shall we? So first is an English player, a couple of English players apparently. Callum Clark. He had that, as mentioned over there, the very famous Albert incident 2014, got quite a big ban over there. And that kind of sort of haunts him a little bit. Then we've got Brian Lima. Now, if you've never watched Brian Lima play rugby, go and watch some clips. And I think this is probably one of the top tacklers ever in terms of the physicality. I mean, it was just silly. He's one of those sort of players you kind of watch, and if you're a youngster thinking maybe I should play rugby, you kind of watch his highlights and then think, on second thought, maybe it's not quite the game for me. He used to be an absolute animal the way he used to tackle. It was stupid. I mean, the sort of force that he'd hit people with was mental. And I mean, Samoans are always known for this. I mean, you think of the Tuolagis, for example. Whenever you play Samoa, it is going to be a physical game. I think these days, what's actually making Samoa a better side is the fact that they're starting to bring in a bit more flair and a bit more skill alongside the physicality that they always have had. But look, probably player as well, in fairness to Brian, but yeah, monster tackler. To call him dirty, well, some of the tackles I think were probably a little bit. Let's just say if he played more now in the kind of the modern laws, you think probably would have gotten a few more cards along the way. But a lot of fun if you want to go watch those highlights. Just seeing people being absolutely decimated. Right. And as you probably noticed, lots of props, lots of locks on the list, and. Danny Grucock is also the next Englishman on the list, in the second row. Big incidents that haunt him. Eye gouging is a consistent theme, I'd imagine, across some of these players, especially look at who's next. And also sort of mentioned that going into the rucks and the likes of that. Again, these are players who I think, had they played a bit more now, they probably would have had a disciplinary record to have matched the reputation. Ironically, you got to look at some players that we think of as dirty players, and you look at their discipline record, it doesn't actually necessarily show that with regards to number of cars, number of bans, the likes of that. And number 7 is Skalkberger. Now, I mean, Skalkberger was played the game on the edge. He always did. I think calling him dirty is a bit of a stretch, except for the fact that there was the very, very poor eye-gouging incident back in the British and Irish Lions series. And that kind of haunted him throughout his career, to be perfectly honest. But I think one of the big things when it came to inverted commas Skalkberger being dirty is that he was just a massive tackler. I mean, you think of that hit against Frida Prayer. And, I mean, he basically just had no care for his own body. And he would just throw himself into opponents, throw himself into tackles. And one of the big tacklers in the world. Yeah, I think these days with head-on-head contact, for example, and the likes of that, he probably would have been in trouble quite a lot more. But yeah, I think that eye-gouging instance is probably one of the big reasons why you can't really make much of a case for Skalk not being on the list itself. However, the fact that we're only seeing David Atub now, the fact that we're already seeing him rather now is pretty terrible. David Atub from France got plenty of ban. over the years, not including a 70-week ban for eye gouging back, I think it was in 2010. 70 weeks. He was banned for 18, in fact, almost 18 months. He was banned for a year and a half for eye gouging, and finds himself below, above 5 other players apparently, which I think is interesting, given the fact that that's probably one of the. I think it might actually still be one of the biggest bans ever. For I wouldn't say a minor incident, an eye gouge incident versus, for example, when we've seen people like full on start punching each other and the likes of that, and deliberate shoulder charges and those type of things. So at the moment, 1 South African, which means we've got 2 South Africans in the top 5. Again, I think we can probably guess which name we're expecting to see, but I'm not sure I completely agree with the other name that we're probably going to see. Dylan Hartley from England. Well, he was a man who had several bans in his career. Always found himself in a bit of hot water, did Dylan Hartley. Played the game on the edge, and is actually holds the record as one of the most penalized players in rugby history. He had referee abuse bans, he had eye gouging bans, as mentioned now, he had a biting ban. Yeah, he basically had it all. And ironically, he's come across very well since retiring. When you look at podcasts and broadcasters, very well spoken, almost quite softly spoken to a certain degree. Quite a relaxed individual, but on the field, he was a bit of a maniac, to be perfectly honest. Now, my question is, how does Thomas Lavanini only come in at 4 as the most red-carded player in international history and one of the most carded players in professional rugby, in the professional rugby era? And most of it's always for repeat offenses, high tackles, dangerous tackles. I mean, this man is just absolutely nowhere. So the fact that he currently comes in 4th, I think is pretty wild. I'm surprised that we haven't seen David Atu further up after a 70-week ban, as well as the historically, statistically most dirty player of all time in international rugby, coming in at only 4th. Number 3, Richard Lowe. If you haven't ever seen it, go and check out. I think it was Super Rugby. One of the big his off the ball incidents where he basically uppercutted a player on the back of it. I don't know if it was a scrum or was a rolling maul. But I remember watching the highlights and a couple of years ago of previous Super Rugby's and the likes of that. And he basically just grabbed a guy and literally uppercutted him. It was one of the most wild things ever. And that's what rugby has come from, because these days you do that, you're talking about 2-year, 3-year bans, something that blatant, something that deliberate. Now, this is the one that I disagree with, and I saw when I saw the cover, and that's Evan Etzebeth. So they say, Raxos here at the UK, that Etzebeth is one of rugby's most feared locks. Probably not wrong. Renowned for its physical dominance, bone crunch tackles, and aggressive play in off-ball scrums. He has built a reputation as one of the dirtiest players in modern rugby. His career has been marked by several controversial moments, most notably a red card for his eye gouge against Wales, underscoring the intensity and sometimes dangerous edge of his style. On a point of order, that red card in November last year was the first red card and only red card of his rugby career, and it happened in his 122nd international match. He has played, I think, over 300 professional rugby matches, 122 tests, and had 1 red card, and I think actually only about, it's about 9 or 10 yellow cards throughout his career. So you look at moments like, yes, the Alan Atoa, a very famous one now. But I think, Evan's always been on the edge. He's always liked a bit of afters. He's always liked the physicality part of it. But I've never considered him a dirty player. I think there are probably even more South African players that are inverted commas dirty when you see kind of late hits, for example, things that are really on the edge. I just think he's always been a player who's played a really hard game and enjoys a bit of the afters, but grabbing someone, for example, and having something to say is a bit different to cheap shots and eye gouging in rucks, for example, and incidents that happen over there. I mean, we've seen some very weird things over the years. But as much as I can probably argue for Evan Etzebeth, we probably can't argue for Bucky's Buerta, arguably the toughest man to have ever played the game, the original OG enforcer. Bucky's Buerta, I mean, tackles, headbutts, off the ball incidents. Bucky's Buerta, I mean, I grew up watching him disappear into rucks and scrums, coming up with blood somewhere, sometimes not even his own, fights and the likes of that. this was a man who absolutely thrived in that role of being an antagonist, and creating, moments and fights, and I think took it too far many times, but was also just the absolute hard man, and that was the whole thing about his role, for example, was to instill a bit of fear into the opposition, which he did do very, very well. So I don't think there can be much argument about this, although, as I said, there are players who have received longer bans, obviously different times, different laws. But what do you think of this list? Let me know down in the comments below. Smash like on the video, subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Steve. I'll chat to you soon.